If everybody's ready, we'll start. I notice a lot of people stayed away from us because it's cold out or something. I know, Dave, you could have driven over from Valley City. I would have bought you breakfast, but good that we could have and meet here, and glad in many ways that COVID numbers are going down. And we can take masks off as we talk and do those things in this meeting, and we deliberately have separated us enough. I think that we've done well. And then virtual, if people have questions or something, if you'd raise a hand, if you need me to recognize you or do that, be happy to do that. Mary, do we have any new introductions? You always put this on my agenda, but do you have some new introductions today?
I don't think that we have any today.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve roll call first? Lisa?
Is Levon on? Levon Eltoff?
Hit your button one more time. There you go.
Is Levon on? She was going to call in.
She might be on phone.
Okay. Bigwood, we have Jeremy Schuler is here. Bonsack?
Yep, here.
Thank you. Karlsrud?
Here.
Erdman?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
Marks here, okay. Mahoney?
Here.
Nielsen? Schmaltz?
Here.
Schmidt?
Here.
Vien?
Here.
Dale? Steve Dale? I see him on.
Here.
Okay. Johnson?
Here.
And Siegert? Carol Siegert? No. One more time for Levon. Did she join us?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
We have a quorum?
Have a quorum, yes.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We have minutes from September 8th or 28th and November 19th. I'd ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
Also move.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Who said the second, please?
Mark Johnson.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carried. Ken Veen, do you have a report for us today?
I do not have a report, so you can move along.
I thought you at least appeal for some donations, but that's okay. Thank you for not.
Thank you.
Al Glasser, are you here today to give us a report?
I am. Can you hear me?
Very well,
Sure.
thank you. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Chairman Mahoney, members of the board, the Technical Advisory Committee met on December 18th, 2020. At that point, they received a number of different updates, basically three major topics. One was related to various early out construction projects. The second general area was an update on the Missouri River Tunnel screens, the final design, and some of the thoughts that were going into that. And then thirdly, an update on the State Water Commission funding. And I'm not going to go through any of those because it's been a lot of moving pieces since December, and you'll get a more accurate update at today's meeting. The committee did have one action item requiring the committee to vote and approve, and that was consideration of a task order for the construction services related to the wet well and site development. You remember that's the first construction project that was awarded. Garrison diversion staff identified what I call a base level task order of $398,041. This was to provide all the basic instructions, professional services. Upon a voice vote, the motion to recommend approval to the full board was approved by the committee. Garrison diversion staff also noted, though, that depending upon certain construction activities that might, if construction goes on in the spring, there is a condition of our 404 permit that would require a couple of biologists to be on site to monitor and watch for certain threatened and endangered species. If that happens, that could actually add about $214,000 to the cost of construction services. We don't know if that'll come into play yet, and it looks like the contractor's getting an early start, so optimistically we won't have to get into too much of that, if any. But if that situation does develop, we will need to do a task order amendment to pay those services and fulfill that permit requirement. We also generally recognize that as other early out projects are bid, we're going to come in with additional task orders, again, for construction services related to each one of those specific bids. Mr. Chairman, that's Chairman report from the Technical Advisory Committee back to the full board.
Any question by committee members? We have a tab C. Do we have to approve that then, Mary? Okay. So we have construction services on the Missouri River Intake Pumping Station wet well, tab C. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second, Schmidt.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Eltoff,
Yes.
Schuler,
Yes.
Bonsack,
Yes.
Karlsruhe,
Yes.
Erdman,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Mahoney,
Aye.
Nielsen,
Yes.
Schmaltz, Schmidt,
Yes.
Ian.
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Good. Now we have an update from Kip Kovar.
Yeah, if you turn to tab D, we're going to talk about early out construction. January 28th, we opened bids for a pipeline project, contract 5A. We had 8 bids. We opened 7. There was 1 non-responsive. There was a base bid, an alternate 1, and alternate 2. The base bid was for 4,000 feet of pipe plus a tunnel. Alternate 1 was for an additional 1,100 feet of pipe. Alternate 2 was an additional 800 feet. So I'll just read off the grand totals. Garney came in at 8.3. Geislinger and Sons came in at 10.5. S.J. Lewis came in at 7.9. Michaels came in at 16.8. Oscar Renda came in at 11.5. Karstensen came in at 10.2. Wagner Construction came in 11.3. And at the bottom, the engineer's estimate was 11.8. And we have Paul Boersma on the line from Black & Veatch. He would like to just discuss a little bit about the engineer's recommendation for the pipeline project. Paul,
Mr. Chairman, this is Paul. Mr. Chairman, this is Paul Boersma. Can you hear me? Okay.
We can hear you okay?
So thank you, Kip. Yes, we did a review of the bids. As part of the bids, the contractors had to submit 2 levels of qualifications. One of them was their qualification as a general contractor. In the apparent low bid, S.J. Lewis met the qualifications that they needed to meet as a general contractor. The bidders also had to submit qualifications related to their particular tunneling expertise. In this case, S.J. Lewis is going to self-perform the tunnel. So they provided qualifications of their own tunneling expertise. They submitted 5 different projects. 3 of those 5 projects did not meet the minimum technical requirements that they needed to meet. That left 2 projects. The 2 projects that were left on paper met the technical minimum requirements that they needed to meet as a tunneling contractor. However, one of their qualifications was based on work that they had done in Des Moines, Iowa. We had called the city of Des Moines to verify the work they had done and to check their qualifications. And the city of Des Moines informed us that their work was not done to their satisfaction. They were not able to successfully complete a tunnel underneath a railroad relatively similar to what this tunnel is going to be. That tunnel was actually completed by another contractor. So based on the city of Des Moines assessment of their lack of successful completion of that project, we continue to evaluate the qualifications of S.J. Lewis to do this type of tunnel. Continue to be in conversations with the city of Des Moines. We are not prepared to make a recommendation at this point in time in regards to whether the S.J. Lewis should be awarded this contract or not.
Thank you. Tammy, do you have a suggested motion on this particular issue for LAWA, please?
I think, they're still looking at the qualifications, and I think the Lake Agassiz board could, do a variety of things. One is you could make a recommendation, but I think they're still looking at this. If you wanted to defer to Garrison Diversion while they are, continuing to review the background, there could be a motion to defer to the Garrison Diversion board in determining the qualifications of S.J. Lewis and awarding to the lowest responsible bidder.
So we had a discussion about this internally and felt that the best way to continue to have the project go forward is to have the Garrison board continue the evaluation and then award the bid accordingly. And Lake Agassiz, we could make that motion to do that, and that wouldn't make us skip anything, but there are some things that they have to check out to make sure that this person that is qualified for us. And that would probably be expedite the bid and the construction the best way. Right, Kip? Okay. So could I have that motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Is there a second?
Carl's second.
Open it to discussion if we want to discuss it, because as you remember, when we did our MOU with the Garrison, we want to make sure that LAWA was incorporated in some of the decision-making. I see this as one of those things that needs further evaluation. We probably wouldn't want to make a decision today as a LAWA award, but I think we can give that responsibility, and the Garrison board should do fine on this. So that's the issue. Any questions on that? Roll call vote, please.
Eltoff? Eltoff?
I'm here, I'm thinking. No.
Bigwood or Schuler, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Bonsack?
Yes.
Karlsruhe?
Yes.
Erdman?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Yes.
Nielsen?
Yes.
Schmaltz? Schmidt?
Yes.
Ian?
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Thank you. Kip, you want to keep going then, or?
You can turn to tab F for the work plan update, and then I brought some photos with today.
We'll turn the mic on. We'll turn the mic on. Go ahead. It should be on, Kip.
I'm not sure how to turn it on. Is it
No,
okay?
they turned
it's
it
on
on.
now. All right, thank you. So I brought some photos with today of the intake construction. We started in December. That contract went to ICS. What you're seeing here is a view of the property that was purchased for the intake work. The first thing that they're building is the wet well. So the contractor is building a template to help with the secant construction. That ring is about 44 feet in diameter. Great weather, by the way, for construction in December. There was some cold weather coming at that time, so we put down some concrete blankets so the ground didn't freeze prior to some concrete pouring. What you see here is these are basically foam cylinders that'll be used for the caisson or for the secant construction. Some rebar that's going into the template. There's the rebar will be inserted into that cavity. And so what you have here are foam cylinders, and then that's going to be filled up with concrete around it. Concrete pump truck right there. So this is just basically a template so that the drill rig can come in and have a good foundation to do his drilling. The secants are 5 feet in diameter, and they'll go down roughly 80 feet into the earth. And here you can see a drill rig. There's a shaft to keep the drill rig going straight down. Inside that, there's a bit that travels down to dig out the material. And I do believe I have one video, just a quick one. So that gray bit is going into the shaft, and that is doing the drilling. Okay, so there are roughly 40 secant piles that need to be drilled. I believe right now we're on number 12 or 13, so they're making good progress. Any questions with the wet well items? We talked about the pipeline construction, that's ongoing. As far as the discharge structure goes, that'll go in the papers today for bids, and we will open up bids March 4th on the discharge structure. The estimated cost of the discharge structure is about $2 million. And maybe the last item I can talk about as far as work plan update, we are working on the Missouri River intake tunnel and screens. That's the last piece here at the Missouri River. I received 60% designs and specs this week. We are on schedule to have completed final designs for March, and that would allow us to go out for bids in April. That's it for my report, if there's any questions.
Any questions, Kip? Task order program management services, what do we do with that? Mary, is that was Kip's report, basically?
Yep, I can cover that. So
And is there any action item we have with that?
tab H, we'd like the board to recommend approve the program management services. That's for basic services through this biennium.
Okay.
The task order total is $166,191. And that allows us to keep budgets up to date, program management tools up to date, your general program management services. I can go through it in detail if you would like.
I think we're okay. We understand you're doing good work. Do I have a motion to continue with program management services?
This
I'll make
is
the
Mark.
motion.
Also move.
Good. Moved and seconded. Mark was on it,
Second.
and Ken's will be. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Eltoff,
Yes.
Schuler,
Yes.
Bonsack,
Yes.
Karlsruhe,
Yes.
Erdman,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Mahoney,
Yes.
Nielsen,
Yes.
Schmaltz, Schmidt,
Yes.
Meehan.
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Very good. Item B, the NWAS, tab I. Kip, are you going to comment that, or Mary?
We just provided the one of the news releases that the record of decision was signed on the Eastern North Dakota Alternative Water Supply Project. That will allow state of North Dakota to use the McCluskey Canal for water supply, so it's a big deal. Provided the news release for you, and hopefully we can keep working on that in the future.
So Tammy, that means we can start taking water out of McCluskey in summer and get going on it, or what?
And not quite, but we're one step closer.
So from your perspective, if we had chose to do that in the future, what would be our hurdles?
So with the Central North Dakota water supply, which was just the 20 CFS, it took about 2 years, but just earlier this month, we have a contract negotiated where we can take water from the canal. And we're still working on the pricing, but we actually got that contract put in place. And we're contemplating that we drafted it in a way that we're going to be able to add a schedule to that for Eastern North Dakota for NDOS. And so, we basically have the contract negotiated, but we're going to start working on that right away now while we have their attention and momentum to see if we can't get that. Once we have the contract signed, then you would be in a position to be able to get water from the canal. So you'd be at a point where you could actually start looking at design and construction and, but we haven't gotten sued on NDOS yet. You got sued on Central North Dakota, and that's working its way through the court system. But there's always a chance that we could get sued on NDOS as well. But it's moving along. We have some contracts signed, and that's a lot further than we were 2 years ago. So that's good.
Finally, somebody signed something now.
I went down to the wire with the inauguration. Got it signed.
I think, Mary, you're finally up. Program schedule. Tab J.
All right, if you would turn to tab J in your books, this is a schedule for the project. It looks a little different than from what you've seen because the previous ones were always focused pretty much on Senate Bill 2020 and meeting those conditions in it. And well, we've met those conditions, and now we've been allowed to start early out construction and been approved funding. So this is now more focused on the early out projects. So in there, we've put down the wet well site, which is already under construction, and the timeline of when that is expected to be completed, and that is November 4th. For the transmission pipeline, once the project is awarded and we're able to do construction, that's expected to go into next spring. The Cheyenne River discharge, we said the advertisements just went in the paper today, and the expected construction would be completed at the end of this year. And then we've moved into, since we're doing final design on the intake screen structure and tunnel, showing how long the design would be, which Kip has talked about, done in April. If we have funding for that and the local cost share put in place and the State Water Commission approves that, we could go to construction. Whole lot of things to check off there. Start construction probably, it looks like in June, and that would be possibly a 2-year project. So we have switched away from the legislative checkoff list to more action items for construction. So that's a really good thing. So no action on that. It's just kind of in there for everybody's information of the construction projects and the timelines for them.
Okay, planning level budget, tab K.
Okay, tab K, this is the planning level budget. It has not completely been revamped, but we have tried to update it a little bit, and I do think that we're gonna continue working on this to make it more construction phased services. It's just taking us a little bit to get there, but everything up on top on the yellow, I've tried to condense this a little bit. Those are all of the things that we have completed. So the conceptual design, the preliminary design, the tasks in the final design that have been completed have been moved up there. Same with what we've done with financial and land acquisition. So total on, we've spent $23,450,000 on items I can say that we kind of closed the book on and have. And in the blue are the final design and items that we had been working on last biennium. And by last biennium, I'm going to call that the 17 to 19 funding because it took us so long to get the 1921 funding. So those are the items that are still ongoing. And of that, we had an effort left of 7.8 million. We have expended 6.3 million. We still have 1.4 million of the 17-19 funds outstanding and committed. Going into the green is the new funding for 1921. And the one thing that has been approved is the Missouri River Intake Screen Structure Design. That's what we want to go to bid this spring. That was a $1.8 million effort, and of course, funding and paying everything, we're always lagging by the time you get paid. Just shows that it's 7% done, though I know with design they're much further than that. And then we've also tried to put down there the construction projects that have been approved by the State Water Commission, which would be the pipeline trenchless, which we just talked about this morning, letting Garrison Diversion Award. The estimated cost for the discharge structure and the Missouri River intake wet well. So total, we have a budget of $50,250,000. We have expended 29.9 and would still have 20.2 million to go. And I'm just going to preface this with, if you could turn to tab N, make you jump around a little bit here. This is to show the funding that the State Water Commission has approved to date. So in the Senate Bill 2020 from last biennium, there was $13 million that we carried forward from the 17-19 biennium for early up construction. And then there was an additional $30 million in new funding. So we had a total of $43 million available for funding. The Resources Trust Fund took a huge hit due to the oil and I'd probably say COVID, everything going on. So we deferred 20 million of that. But long story to get to the point saying that of that, the State Water Commission has approved 16.4 million to date, and the local cost share is 2.57 million.
Say, just to note by my media helper here, Brian, that some people don't have their mute on remotely, and we're hearing a little sound out there that's kind of making it fuzzy in here. So if you're on remotely, just please make sure you're on mute. Go ahead, Mary.
Perfect. So I'll just go back to tab K then, which is that planning level budget. To get to that $50 million, I have incorporated that local and State Water Commission cost share that has been approved to date. There isn't anything else in there yet. As the State Water Commission approves more or we go to ask for more money, then we'll add to it.
So then you tell us the planning level budget, and then you're going to revise it in the same book. So you want to go to your revised budget?
Yeah, so tab L is the budget that was used when the interim finance agreements were signed. That was our anticipated effort for the 19 to 21 funds, and that was showing that we are going to expend 7.5 million of the new money and the 13 million for early out construction projects. So this also needs to be updated, and we're just kind of looking to see what we come out of the legislature with, and then we will bring everything together.
So we need no action on it, it's just something that's going forward that we need to be aware. Kip's going to tell us our 2021 work plan, tab M.
Yes, let me know if there's anything we missed or we'd like to add or delete. Number one, early out projects, continue with construction on the intake, wet well, discharge structure, and the pipeline. Approve construction services task orders for those early out construction projects. Continue and complete final design of the Missouri intake tunnel and screens. Have those ready by March. Design and install additional pipeline if funding is available. Continue with right-of-way. Continue using our program management tools and financial support items. Present financial models to stakeholders. Continue with user outreach meetings, preparing for final signups, and continue communications. Did I miss anything?
I think you've got everything. Anybody see anything we're missing, John or Tammy? You think they ought to add some kind of a legal thing, or are we okay there? Okay. We need a motion on that as well, Kip? Or is it just a report?
Yes.
That one was a motion.
A motion. Can I have a motion to approve the 2021 work plan, please?
Schmidt makes a motion.
And do I have a second?
I'll second it, Levon.
Good. Any questions, Kip? Don't make it so easy on them. Roll call, please.
Okay. Altoff,
Yes.
Schuler,
Yes.
Von Sack,
Yes.
Karlsruhe,
Yes.
Erdman,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Mahoney,
Yes.
Nielsen, Schmaltz, Schmidt,
Yes.
In. Ken,
Yes. Yes.
motion's carried.
Southwest funding was already discussed by Mary earlier, so we'll go to Central North Dakota Water Supply, State of Missouri lawsuit, Tammy Norgaard.
I can just report that the lawsuit is proceeding. The state of Missouri and a few public interest groups have filed their briefing. We're working on our responses right now. We're working closely with the Department of Justice attorneys who defend the federal government on NEPA lawsuits, so they're taking the lead on responding to the NEPA claims. And briefing should be done within the month, and then probably a hearing, I would guess, in April. Nothing's been scheduled yet.
So, you know, the Super Bowl's coming up and you kind of pick winners and losers. Are you confident that your team's going to do okay in this?
Certainly, certainly. Very confident. We have a very strong case.
Thank you. Do you know who's going to win the Super Bowl?
Nope,
Oh, okay.
won't predict that.
Mary, update on legislative update?
Yeah, we put in testimony for Senate or House Bill 1020 in there. Dwayne provided that testimony. 1020 is the State Water Commission's budget, which has the Resources Trust Fund funding in there. Last session it was Senate Bill 2020. This time it is now 1020. So we have been down at the legislature. I go down there probably once a week. Dwayne is down there. And John Olson is working for us down at the legislature, who's there every day monitoring items. We have provided quite a few items to House Appropriations, who has the State Water Commission budget. Originally, we requested $50 million for the Red River Valley Water Supply Project. That's what's in the State Water Commission's Water Development Plan. House Appropriations had asked us for a $30 million, $40 million, and $50 million budget to see what it would be that we would work on or what was critical. So we have provided that. We are hearing that Red River right now is probably in there at $30 to $40 million. They're still holding 1020 to see. There's also a separate bonding bill that is going to cover some of the larger projects, and if that bonding bill passes, the Metro diversion would not be in 1020 anymore, and same with the Mouse River flood control. So if that bonding bill passes, then there's more funding in Resources Trust Fund for the other projects, including Red River Valley Water Supply projects. So it's kind of a wait and see effort. So I think that they are going to hold 1020 until they have a better feeling on the bonding bill, so that they know they have a version and a B version, and it's with or without those two large projects. I'll just add that recently, in the last couple of days, in House Bill 1425 and another bill that has to do with the Infrastructure Revolving Loan Fund, the Red River Valley Water Supply Project is already an eligible project. This will be for the local financing, but right now the terms are 30 years at 2%, and you can take out a total of $15 million. There have been some amendments that have been added to the bill and have not been voted on by either of the full House or Senate, but it would change a larger water infrastructure project, which would qualify Red River Valley Water Supply for it, to be eligible up to a 40-year loan, maximum of 2% interest, which doesn't change the interest rate, but it also increases it from $15 million to $40 million. It's not the full amount that Red River would need for the build out of the project, but it would help us for the next couple of bienniums.
So we're asking our members to contact legislators to support that particular part. The low interest loan is extremely important for our local users. The other issue that goes there is that they were having an accelerator of interest from 2 to 5% over time, and we actually need it left at 2%, which the Bank of North Dakota has put in. So if you have any local legislators that you know, it would be kindly to go out and at least send an email or letter to them supporting that. Anything else, Mayor?
No, that would be much appreciated. And as any of these move forward, I know last session, the Lake Agassiz members were really helpful when we'd send out a call to action. So as stuff progresses, we're kind of in round one right now. We might be making some personal contacts to say to please help us.
Now, the other thing that we would need to do, we had a discussion about local share, and we feel our finance committee should probably relook at that to see what the local shares would be. So we'd like to task the finance committee to go back and look at that. We've got arrangements right now for the money that we share with the project, but we have to figure out going forward, what is it going to be? And I'm anticipating we're going to be pushing the 2% for 40 years. Mr. Grubb, you want to comment on that?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yeah, as you all probably remember, Grand Forks and Fargo, in order to get the early out construction going, agreed to pay for the local cost share, kind of cash as you go for early out construction. As we get into the next phases, the numbers go up, obviously, and in speaking with Todd Phelan at Grand Forks, we really do need a financing package for the local share. And then, as we've always kind of anticipated, the users, Fargo, Grand Forks, for example, would start paying their monthly rate as a user to the project. So that's what we're hoping to get to, because cash as you go for the local users, as we get beyond the early out construction, gets really difficult. So that's what we're tasking our finance committee to look at.
Makes sense? And I don't need a motion on that. They can just do that, right? Yeah. So we go to financial report.
If you would turn to tab P, this is your 2020 final budget analysis. So for 2020, we had anticipated income of $31,575. Actual income received was $30,878. We anticipated expenses of $122,000. Total expenses were actually $98,000. So at the beginning of the year, Lake Agassiz started with $712,000 in the bank. With the income received, it was available, total available funding was $743,000. After expenses of $98,978, at the end of the year, Lake Agassiz had $644,467 in the bank. And we always list all of the bills that have been paid, and those are on the following tabs. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to talk about having an audit on this, but auditors always like to know that we've shown the board the finances and all the bills paid, so we would need a motion on this one.
So can we do a motion for P and Q? Because Q is going to pay some bills as well.
Yep, those are the ones that have been paid.
Could I have a motion to approve tab P and tab Q?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Eltoff,
Yes.
Schuler,
Yes.
Bonsack,
Yes.
Karlsruhe,
Yes.
Erdman,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Mahoney,
Aye.
Nielsen, Schmaltz, Schmidt,
Yes.
Vian. Ken.
Ken Veen? It looks like he said yes, but the mic must not be on. Okay,
Okay.
put a thumb up, yeah.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
Item B, 2021 Budget Analysis Statement, tab R.
Yes. So tab R is the 2021 budget for Lake Agassiz. So for now, this is our best estimate for funding and expenses for 2021. This includes the funding that has been approved to date. We have not added anything in there that might come out of the 21-23 legislative session. Mid-year, once we know what that is, then we'll go ahead and ask you to amend and revise the budget. So for now, for 2021, we are anticipating income of $2,607,000. $30,000 is from the dues, and $2.5 million is from the interim finance agreements that have been signed that for now, Fargo and Grand Forks have said that they would pay that local share. So that comes to a total of $2.6 million. And for expenses, we're looking at total expenses of $2,672,000. The dues, expenses, accounting, everything up to construction are pretty much the same as what you have paid in previous years. Once we go into, we have the construction, the engineering, property acquisition, and the administrative and legal, and those are the items that would be mainly funded through the Lake Agassiz, the interim finance agreements. So that shows total expenses of $2,672,642. As you'll see that it does show expenses more than income that is coming in by $64,850. But Lake Agassiz does have $644,000 in the bank, where if all those expenses came in as anticipated, you'd have to use some of the banking balance. So Mr. Mayor, or Mr. Chairman, I'd sure answer any questions on this, but this would be another one that we'd ask for a motion so that this would be the approved budget.
Any questions, Mary? If not, can I have a motion? Is there a second?
This is Mark. I'll move.
Second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Eltoff,
Yes.
Schuler,
Yes.
Bonsack,
Yes.
Karlsruhe,
Yes.
Erdman,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Mahoney,
Yes.
Nielsen, Schmaltz, Schmidt,
Yes.
Vian. Ken.
He's doing thumbs up. It's hard to have him speechless, but.
Motion's carried.
Item C, membership dues. Mary?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, these are dues for 2021 that we are asking if Lake Agassiz wants to pay and be a member. The first one is tab S, and this is to be a member of the Water Coalition. And this is $1,000 dues. This is one that you have been a membership of for the past several years.
Let's go through all three, the Water Use
Okay.
Association dues as well.
Yep, and then tab T is with the Water Users Association, and Garrison Diversion is a member of this, and I'm not sure if any of our larger systems also are members of this, but the Water Users Association, they do a lot of work with the legislature and a lot of policy work and other work, and Garrison Diversion, we do work very closely with them. They are asking if Lake Agassiz would like to be a member of the North Dakota Water Users as well, and that would be $5,000 in membership. And then tab U is actually to approve the dues letter that Lake Agassiz sends out to member systems as showing in the 2021 membership dues, and this is on tab U. Tab U would be the letter that would be sent to members. And then the second page is the dues that they pay, and this is what usually brings in roughly $30,000 a year for Lake Agassiz.
So I could entertain a motion that approves all three. Do I have a motion?
I have a question first.
Sure.
On the North Dakota water users, do we ask them in return for membership to Lake Agassiz?
Mary?
I would state if the board directed us to send them a membership letter, we sure would.
I find their dues is, I know we cover a lot of area, but it just seems that that's quite substantial.
Any further discussion? Do I have a motion? Kind of a quiet group out here today.
So move.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Sounds like there's reluctance and hesitancy. Do I have some discussion here? Just because it's cold out, we don't need to not talk.
Yeah, and I know that our chairman, Ellen Walter, has been involved with that in Duane, and some of them have actually been on the board. I'm kind of in the peripheral, but in working with those associations has been very beneficial for Garrison.
Mr. Grubb?
Just want to let you know the city of Fargo is members of both.
I thought that you were, Bruce, but I didn't get to ask you beforehand.
Duane?
Yeah, we work with them quite extensively at Garrison and then on the other groups that we belong to. And they carry a pretty big stick down at the legislature, and they do a very good job of keeping us informed weekly. We get a weekly report from them on what's going down on the legislature, going on at the legislature. And compared to what lobbyists cost, I think that it looks like a big figure, but it's actually probably pretty reasonable.
Very good. Thank you for that discussion. Roll call vote,
Could I
please.
ask for a clarification? I wanted to know who made the motion because I have Johnson seconding.
Who made the first motion, please?
Bonsack.
Okay, thanks, Bill.
Roll call vote, please.
Eltoff?
Yes.
Schuler?
Yes.
Bonsack?
Yes.
Karlsruhe?
Yes.
Erdman?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Mahoney?
Yes.
Nielsen?
Yes.
Schmaltz? Schmidt,
Yes.
Vian.
I read his lips, he said yes.
Motion's carried.
Thank you. Unfinished business, we have user meetings, Mary Meridian. See, Burion's here, I suppose he could talk to that, huh? You're gonna go out and see everybody in the middle of winter, or what are you gonna do? I guess he's gonna defer to you, Mary.
Mr. Chairman, we are preparing to go out and meet with user systems, and many of you should have been contacted. We've been seeing if systems prefer to meet virtually or in person. We do hope to go out end of February and into March, and we meet with the majority of the systems. We do have a PowerPoint presentation that we'd like to review today. It is fairly long, but you guys know the project pretty well, so we're gonna fly through a few of the slides. But especially since it was said at our last meeting that Lake Agassiz board members would probably go out with us within your regions. So we wanted to give you a brief view of a PowerPoint presentation that we hope to show. And then in addition, we also have some handouts that will be very unique to each system that we will leave behind with estimated costs and everything. I do not have those with, and PowerPoint that we want to show today doesn't get into, I'm going to say that we picked a system to use, but we didn't get into down to the detail of the cost for each system. But when we do meet with you, we will do that. So Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, Steve and I would like to go through the presentation, which Kip has loaded up there. Which one does it? That one? All right, so like I said, this will be going out to each system. So we just picked a system and it happens to be Grafton. So we will go out and meet with the systems, kind of give them an overview of the project. When we were out last meeting with the systems, the past engagement that we did, reiterate the need for the project and how it could be unique to their system, the progress that we've made in our legislative asks, explain the interim finance agreements that have been signed, and then talk about future user participation. And on this is to show that Garrison Diversion and Lake Agassiz are jointly pushing or working on the Red River Valley Water Supply Project together, and to show that Lake Agassiz Water Authority will actually have the agreements with each of the user systems, and then Lake Agassiz will have the agreement with Garrison Diversion, and then Garrison Diversion will provide the water to Lake Agassiz and down to the local systems. This is the project map showing that we'd get the water out of the Missouri River at the intake. You see the nice little dotted line showing that there's an option that we could get water out of the McCluskey Canal. At some point in the future, we do hope to make that a solid dotted line, that we're going to get water out of there, and that the water would be dumped into the Cheyenne River and regulated by Lake Ashtabula and go down the Cheyenne and Red Rivers. This would be the full system build out if all 35 systems did participate. You'll see that there are some dashed lines and some solid lines in pretty colors. And the dashed lines are because there's a couple of different options of getting water to those systems that are not on a river conveyance. The project will be an emergency water supply for roughly half of North Dakota's population, anticipating that we will serve actually 376,000 people with the project in the future. And some of the design components of the project, it will be a 72-inch pipeline, 165 miles in length, steel pipeline at 165 cubic feet per second, and the buried depth of the pipeline will be 7 feet to the top. This is our system profile showing the elevation changes from the Missouri River needing the break tank at the high point, and then the discharge structure on the Cheyenne River. Our estimated total project cost for the project, and these are in 2019 dollars. When we go out, we're going to try and update these to 2021 dollars, is a total of $1.19 billion. In the past, we went out with initial outreach in 2016 to the systems. We had over 100 meetings. Out of the outcome of those meetings were 35 systems signed up to the development agreements, which was 20 cities and 15 rural water districts, with a total nomination of 159 cubic feet per second. And that was broken into 86 cubic feet per second of domestic water and 73 for industrial.
So if we switch over then specifically to how we anticipate giving the presentation to users, as Mary indicated at the beginning of the presentation, we picked the city of Grafton out of the 35 users that are out there as our example for this morning. And when we went through and did the 100 plus meetings in 2016, several of them were in Grafton. And at the conclusion of that process, they signed a development agreement where they nominated for 0.9 CFS of domestic water and 1.1 CFS of industrial water for a total nomination of 2.0 CFS. At the same time, we did have some conjunctive meetings with neighboring systems, specifically Walsh Rural Water District and Park River, and with the idea that if an industry ever came to that area, it might be in any one of their service areas, and so if they could look at the total amount of water that was available for industrial need rather than having a gap or an overlap amongst the systems, that would be beneficial. And so when they all got said and done in terms of industrial nominations, Walsh nominated for one CFS, Park River for 0.4, and then if you add the industrial nomination of 1.1 for Grafton, that left a total industrial nomination of 2.5 CFS for the region. In order to help Grafton look at planning for 2075, which obviously is a very difficult thing to do when you look out at the time, 60 years out in the future, we tried to put together some very long-term population projections. We had some information from the previous EIS that was done by the federal government that tended to be very negative for the communities that were out there. We also then worked with the communities on some type of nominal growth based on looking to the future. The thought being that if you aren't going to at least stay flat or have some growth, then looking for additional water supply isn't that important. And the city of Grafton, as I remember, chose this upper level number as their planning horizon, their planning population for the future. We also looked at per capita per day water demands for the city of Grafton and then multiplied that times the population projection that they did, and that ended up determining what they would use as a basis for their nomination. And if you remember back of several slides, there was 0.9 CFS used for domestic. You can see that 0.9 CFS is what they ended up nominating for. That number is actually smaller than something that they used in the past, but given the population drop that they've had and then the minor growth that they anticipated, that was the conservative number that they chose for nomination for this project. Since the work that was done by the Dwayne and Mary and I and others to go out and meet with those systems, there was an independent analysis done specifically for the Northeast area. That was done based on some concerns that were out in that area, and they did a series of assumptions. And as that work was done, there's some likelihood that could potentially affect some of the nominations for systems in Northeast North Dakota. When we go out for the final presentation, in addition to showing the specific numbers that Mary mentioned, we'll try to include the conclusions from this report so that we can have that available information to the users. For Grafton specifically, our example for today, they were included only as a supplier, not as one of the entities that were studied, and so they were not affected by this master plan. So what that means from both a domestic and industrial supply standpoint, and it looks like the crosshairs are getting a little bit in the midst of this. Grafton historically has used about 110 gallons per capita per day. But if you look looking to the future, domestic per capita per day water demands have been dropping based on a variety of different conservation and price of water and just the way we all habitually use water. And so if that were to drop to 102 or 92, you can see the amount of people that Grafton would be able to serve in that second line there based on a 0.9 nomination here. Based on a variety of per capita here, you can see the population that Grafton would be able to serve moving forward. On the industrial side, the way that we've presented this to everybody is we went out with this continuum. And so on the low end, there were some very low end processing plants like chicken, turkey processing, which used very little water. We looked at a Durham plant and we just kept chipping away until we got to something like a very large beef processing plant, which would use 6 CFS of water. I think for the larger systems, we did show a nitrogen facility, which would be more like 11 or 12 CFS. And so what this continuum shows that if Grafton nominated for 1.1 of industrial, if Walsh nominated for their 1.0, and they also were shown to have some excess capacity in their permit at the time, that's the purple bar. And then if Park River nominated for 0.4, and then you added 0.44 to that, you can see that along this continuum, the Walsh County region would have the ability to serve all of these different type of industries, either several of them added together, or on the high end, some of these potential industries out here. For any industry that's north of that, we did not anticipate that they would have the potential to serve that. If the nomination for Walsh were to change, or Grafton were to change, or Park River were to change, obviously that would shorten up this bar if they did reduce their numbers sometime in the future. What this shows then is all the different users that are out there in terms of commitments. Mary's talked about 35 users to date, just showing the dynamics of water use in the Red River Valley. We've already had enough consolidations that's down to 35. Fargo is agreeing to provide the water for West Fargo and for Casserole Water and to accept their nominations. So that clipped 2 systems. Grand Forks is looking to serve East Grand Forks for this emergency water supply. That clipped 1. East Central is a new system that merged, the merger between Grand Forks Trail and Trail, so that clipped 1 system. And then Langdon now is served by Northeast, and so that also clipped 1 system. So we've had that much change over the years. What we did then is we just merged all of that together for the time being for this graphic, and we'll have to see what the appetite is for nominations moving forward. Oh yes, I'm sorry. This is then switching to categories. So I presented half of the past engagement effort. We'll switch the need for the project. And I do remember there's some messy graphics in here, so I'll try to address those. This is our famous individual that nobody knows who it is, but shows back to the 1930s when we had no flow, active flow in the Red River for 5 months in 1934, and shows how draconian a drought can be in the Red River Valley. This is the graphic that we've used several times, where up in the upper left, you can see how dynamic the flat plain of the Red River Valley is, where at times we have surface water in blue, at times we have a drought in red, and what we rarely have is Goldilocks in between. We're actually with our very dry winter. You can see the state of North Dakota, and as of January 28th of 2021, you can see that we're in either a abnormally dry, a moderate drought, or a severe drought across the entire state of North Dakota, with the southeast corner of the state probably being our best area at this point in time. It's well known that if the 1930s repeats itself, that we'll be in severe trouble in the Red River Valley. Climatologists know that North Dakota tends to cycle in 30-year periods for whatever reason. We've been on a really long, sustained wet period since 1994, so we're probably due statistically for a drought, and they've said that that's likely before 2050. And then there was some economic work done at the time of the EIS. We've updated that to 2018 dollars. We'll probably bring that one forward to 2020. But it was anticipated that a drought similar to the 1930s would have a $27 billion impact over 10 years on the Red River Valley. We've also have a very thirsty industrial, agricultural development type activities in the valley. This slide just shows either some of the projects that have been recently developed or are anticipated or have been missed. And this is another one that ends up being very, very dynamic. There's a new project in Grand Forks that has already been constructed. There's a new one that they're looking at. And so industrial water is going to be a really big need for the future. And if we look at the current situation, almost all of the supplies in Red River Valley have been appropriated to the point where Grand Forks is looking to sell its wastewater and Fargo has already begun to sell its wastewater. Here we have 3 different slides. So when we get into the SIST project presentation, if it's a surface water system where they're very susceptible to drought, we'll use this slide. We also have one specifically for small cities that are on groundwater, and we also have a slide specifically for rural water districts. And so for the large surface water systems, we'll have a segment where we'll talk extensively about how the 1930s drought was traumatic and how we expected that would be traumatic once again. And then we'll emphasize those economic opportunities that we showed from the industrial slide. When we get to the small systems on groundwater, because groundwater is not as susceptible to drought, and because many of the small towns have sufficient groundwater appropriations, we wouldn't emphasize the drought so much, but we would emphasize both the economic opportunities that could be out there moving forward, as well as planning for future. When you look out 55 years, that's a long, long time. It's very difficult to anticipate that. And so if there were change in that moving forward, one needs to be prepared for that. When we look at the rural water districts, and this is somewhat of a hybrid, we would talk about the economic opportunity of industrial development. We would talk about the 55 years looking forward. And this one's a pretty easy one to look at because none of the rural water districts have been around 55 years yet. And so if they go back to the origin of 1969 and looked at when their systems, first one was developed or whenever any of you were developed, and you look at your first system versus your system today, and just look at how much change you've gone through, it's likely that change is going to continue for the next 55 years. And then we'll talk a bit, we've talked a little bit internally, and 1926B could also be an important issue for those rural water districts to make sure that they have sufficient water supplies so that 1926B entitlement is not pierced. We'll then switch to a graphic that's somewhat hard to explain, but one of the unique things about this project is we're not going to just bring a rural water system pipe or regional water system pipe to everybody's doorstep. We are going to use the significant benefits of Lake Ashtabula as a re-regulating reservoir. That's been shown to likely have a value of about $500 million conservatively, that reservoir. That reservoir does have nominations or reservations already from past actions where 5 entities helped contribute to the construction costs of this project: Grand Forks, West Fargo, Fargo Valley City, and Lisbon. And so you can see the allocation there. And then there's also an unallocated portion that the state engineer uses. This is the part that, in the absence of these 5 needing water, the project could use this as a way to bring water in and out. The goal of the project is to keep the conservation pool full right here. So we wouldn't play around with the flood pool up here. We'd bring water into the reservoir to keep it at this elevation here. And then the project size of 165 CFS was designed to never dip below the Fish and Wildlife pool. So the project does not intend to use this. That's a factor of safety. It also allows the Corps not to have to fight with the Corps to get into the Fish and Wildlife pool, but only use the operating pool for this particular project. Why we're going to go into so much emphasis on that? This is a model that was developed, and historically, you always saw this graphic for the first 10 years. So what you saw is that we put 165 CFS into Lake Ashtabula. This was the resulting level of Lake Ashtabula in red. This 28,000 CFS right here, if you can imagine a horizontal line, is where the Fish and Wildlife pool bottom is. So this line does not coincidentally match up exactly with that. That's where the 165 CFS fill capacity comes from.
And we focused in on the eastern half of the state where the population is more dense and more of our members are, and they're closer together geographically. And we did an all-out effort on going and talking to each member one-on-one about their needs. The executive committee, our executive committee, did form an advisory committee to help lead this process. Of course, we developed cost estimates and agreements on how we could do that. And we were, again, focused in on the eastern half of the state. But lo and behold, our first line crew, we stuck out in western Kansas, the city of Dayton. And if you look at, if you could pick one city where you would locate a line crew, Dayton would probably be the lowest on the list because they are not.
They were focused on the eastern half of the state, so
They were.
coincidentally. And so, and then what this, so if I can just maybe start over again, just real quickly. So this red line, this is the top of the conservation pool, bottom of the conservation pool. We're pumping water into the 1930s because of the drought. We're running the project almost all out. And this is the elevation of the reservoir. And this shows the amount of time that we needed to use the project. We had a graphic like that we've showed you dozens of times. During the NDOT's project, we were asked to do a cumulative depletions analysis on the Missouri River. And as we contemplated how to do that, we needed to start looking at how much would we need to run the project in other years. And we have the river modeled from a natural flow standpoint from 1930 to 2001. So that's what's shown on this graphic. And the really interesting thing that we found from this that we didn't anticipate at that time is that if we take 2075 population demand and associated water demands and we superimpose those over 1930 to 2001, we will have to operate the project over a 1950s drought, over a 1960s drought, over a 1970s drought, and we would really have to operate the project from the drought of 1980s. And so this was really an eye-opener for the project team in that it showed that this isn't just an emergency project for the 1930s, it's really an emergency project for drought that would have a very frequent use as we move forward.
Now, talking into some of the progress that we've made on the project. As you're aware, we've completed the conceptual and preliminary design reports for the project, a value engineering study. We've completed the financial model back in 2018. We continue to refine that and we'll bring it back forward. And for the entire project pipeline corridor, we have acquired 50% of the easements. Our current work plan is that we're continuing to work on the phased final design. We're working on land services. We have acquired the property for the intake site and the discharge structure. Continuing to refine the financial modeling, as I stated, and we have started on early out construction or are ready to bid some of those. For last legislative session, which was the 2019 to 21, we went to the legislature to request an affordable cost share for the state and the locals. And out of there, it came that there would be a 75% state cost share, 25% local cost share. We requested the long-term low interest loan from the state. That technically was not awarded. Like I said, we're eligible for the infrastructure revolving loan fund, but it didn't have the 40-year term on it. It is just at 30 years. And a long-term project funding plan to fund the project over the next 5 biennia. That was not received either. So for this biennium, and I kind of already talked to you about this project, is saying so far of the $43 million that was put in Senate Bill 2020 for the Red River Valley Water Supply Project, the State Water Commission has approved $16.4 million so far. And we break out the cost shares between the state and the locals. Some of the first $13 million of that is at a 90-10 cost share, And that's through more of a gentleman's agreement on past funding, and everything moving forward will be at the 75-25 cost share. You all have sat through many meetings where we talked about meeting our requirements in Senate Bill 2020. We're very proud to say that we've completed all of those requirements, which led us to being able to access the funding for the early out construction. And our early out construction, which was estimated to be a total of $14.4 million, is the Missouri River Intake Pumping Station wet well, which Kip showed we're already under construction, and he showed the pictures of the crews working there. We talked about we're close to awarding the bid on the pipeline segment, and we are putting the discharge structure in the papers today to start advertising for bids on that. For 2021, at the current legislative session, we are requesting that long-term low-interest loan. We have been stating that we really need that for the locals to be able to afford their cost share. Looking at the affordable cost share, we have brought to the legislature, this has kind of been shot down to date, stating for the larger systems, a 75-25 cost share, 80, and then for smaller systems, 80% state, 20% local. We do have some legislators who do like this, but there is probably a majority or the more vocal ones that do not like this as much. We're asking for a defined construction schedule. And as we had already stated that we are requesting $50 million. Right now we're in the $30 to $40 million range. Once we get into the financial models, I'll just point out that the long-term low-interest loan, when it comes to how much it will cost each system to be able to be part of this project, is much more important than the 80-20 cost share. It really is in the loan terms that saves the money. We had talked about interim agreements have been signed to keep the project momentum going and to get the early out construction. They're between Garrison Diversion and Lake Agassiz, and through Grand Forks and Fargo. And the purpose of the loans was to be able to match that 10% for the early out construction and the 25% local cost share up to $1.875 million to continue designing and permitting the project. Grand Forks and Fargo are prepaying those with the expectation when agreements are signed by other systems that systems will pay those loans back, pay those amounts back. It would be able to be put in your loans.
So once again, then using Grafton as an example, and I probably should have shared when we looked at some of those population and water demand projections, obviously we'll pull those out and put whichever respective user we're at, but this would be the interim agreement costs if we were to take the 1.44 of 10% money in green and then up to 1.875 of 25% money in blue. The most that we anticipate spending this biennium is $3.3 million on a local level. Obviously right now Fargo and Grand Forks have agreed to pay for that through the interim agreement, but should the other systems agree to pay, that we will have their costs available for them during the meeting. And so for Grafton, we just highlighted that in green. Wherever we go, we would do the same thing for the other systems. In addition, there's some detailed work being done by the financial team, as Mary indicated, to show at these meetings what the overall costs are projected to be for the users. It's going to still have to be in some euro dollars, and so we're hoping to present that in 2020 dollars as shown at the top. The core pipeline capital cost would be one component, so that blue line that goes across the prairie, what share of that line is each of the users going to pay? Baseline operating, that's where we need to run a certain amount of water through the project and keep things maintained on an annual basis. It's been shown that 4 CFS should be enough to run through the pipeline to prevent it from going stagnant. And it's been estimated that that's about a $1.5 million annual cost to keep that going. If and when a drought hits and we have to run the project at 165 CFS, we're calling that drought operating. So I skipped one, that's $14.8 million annually when we have to do that. In addition, we'll be paying debt service heavy in the early years, so we don't want to get too crazy with this. but at some point in time, there's going to be another need for infused capital. And so in the early years, we've presented a number of 1.8 million for renewal and rehabilitation. Once the debt service comes off and the asset is older, I anticipate that would jump up quite a bit, but we think that'll be enough in the early years to get the job done. For those systems that aren't going to be able to pull the water directly out of the river, there will be some type of branch pipeline. We'll have capital cost estimates for that. And then if we can get to this kind of detail, we can also talk about operating costs for those branch pipelines. So then if we look at it specifically from the Grafton standpoint and the local cost area, Mary's talked about how the capital cost for the pipeline, we have state concurrence to pay for that, 75% state, 25% local. For the drought operating costs, which are those costs that would only happen in an emergency, we're hoping to get some state support for that, much like they support the Devil's Lake outlet. And so the financing modeling that's been done so far assumes a 75-25 split on that. And then for those branch pipelines, because they'd be more like a typical MR&I project, it was assumed that they'd get 75-25 funding as well. For the baseline operating, in order for the system to have skin in the game, as well as the project renewal and rehabilitation, the financial model at this point assumes that 100% of that would be covered by the locals. For Grafton specifically, remember they were 2 CFS of project water, 157.23 CFS. If you do the math, that's about 1.25% that Grafton should be paying. However, what you've decided to date to do is more of a matrix on how things are funded. And without getting into the detail on that, the more people need the water project, the closer they are to the original service point to the project, whether they need an extension pipeline or not. There's a series of considerations that go into that. And then there's tiered dollar amounts for those different usages. And because Grafton is later down in the project in terms of its location on the river, they are projected through the tiered pricing model to pay 0.901%. So you can see there's some effective subsidization for Grafton through this process. When this is all said and done, and this is where Mary said we don't have the numbers for you this morning, we'll have that share for Grafton or whichever user we're presenting to of all of those aspects. We'll have specific dollar amounts. We will then look at the assumed debt model, that 40 years and 2%, and bring that to an annual cost for the city of Grafton, as well as there was a lot of work done on bill impacts. So we'll be able to show, given their utility model, what we think the cost anticipated impacts will be to their bill to support the project.
Okay, and now we will go into where we're wrapping up the presentation. This has always been our pillars for the project, is to keep it affordable for systems to participate, both the large and the users. That the project will actually benefit up to 50% of North Dakotans, and our current models show that it would be a $27 billion impact to the state if we had a 1930 style drought without this project. And we're committed to good stewardship, and that means committed to the land, to the use of state and local dollars, and the environment. And that the Red River Valley Water Supply Project, it is an economic development initiative, as we had talked about. Without the project in the Red River Valley, you have very limited water uses to bring in any more water-intensive industry, and it's a long-term emergency water supply. We are still in a continued interim phase. As we had mentioned, that at this point, Fargo and Grand Forks have agreed to fund the initial local cost of the interim cost agreement, but would definitely welcome if any other systems wanted to help pay in that cost right now. And then we want to talk to all of the systems and just say, with the facts that they know today, are they thinking thumbs up, they still want to be in the project, kind of neutral, they would like to be in the project but they're not quite sure, or they're no longer interested in the project, to help refine it back down. And thank you for being our guinea pig audience to let us go through this.
Well done.
So when it comes to that last slide, everybody signed 35 systems signed a development agreement. It was really anticipated that would end with the money that went along with the development agreement. Everybody's been carried on, well beyond the anticipated life of that development agreement. I always forget the two, but there's a water supply agreement envisioned and a participation agreement, and whether that's one or two different agreements, that'll be what people need to sign on the dotted line. And so nobody's going out during this year and asking for that type of commitment because those agreements aren't ready. But it would be nice to just know, given that there's no immediate commitment unless they volunteer to make that, are they thinking, this looks great? Are they thinking, we'll hang on for now? Or are they, hell no, we're not going to do it? And if they're hell no, then we'll have to talk to them about how we get them to closer to yes or maybe, or for sure yes. So that's our thought process. I'll probably swear she won't.
Very good. Any questions, members? Bruce Grubb.
Mr. Chairman, so in our agreement, LAWA agreement with Garrison, it's kind of LAWA's responsibility to go out to users. My understanding is we would like to ask your team to operate on our behalf to do that, because you've met with all of them several times. There's familiarity, there's economies of scale, all those things. But will you be asking for LAWA area representation at these user meetings, which I think would be good? And if you're planning on doing that, maybe just remind everybody that they might be called on to help out.
Very good point. Thank you, Bruce. At the last Lake Agassiz meeting, it was said that we'd have the same team going out that initially did that. That was Steve and myself and Dwayne and Sean Gaddy were the four that were spread very thin and running around, but we won't have as many meetings this time. But it was also brought up that Lake Agassiz board member were in your region to join us, and I actually had been contacted after the meeting by quite a few board members saying, yep, they would love to come with. So like I said, we're just kind of getting in the initial stages of trying to plan those meetings, and we'll be working with the board members. And that was going to be the Lake Agassiz representation.
Good point. Thank you. Any questions of the presentation? I mean, the meeting was going along pretty good here until we hit this presentation. Now you've caught me back up to the meeting.
We were flying along.
Yeah, okay. New business is the audit for 2020. There's some comments, Mary, you want to make to that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to bring this to the board to discuss. As you're aware, the last audit that we did actually ended up being an agreed upon procedure. And you had nominated your two financial advisory committee chairs, Kent Costin and Maureen Storstad, to kind of lead that. And we did an agreed upon procedure, and it was for 2017, 18, and 19. So my question to you is, would you like to do that again? And do you want to wait and combine 2020 and 2021 together? And I'm just going to throw out my personal opinion that right now Lake Agassiz is not writing a lot of checks, that you could refer it back to Kent and Maureen, and if they felt good on that, you could do 2020 and 2021 together the same way. We had Bailey present, I think it was virtually or over the phone, to say how the AUP went, and it had flying colors on it. So to save Lake Agassiz money, because it doesn't matter if you do 1 year or 2 years, it's about the same cost. So cost savings wise, I'm wondering if you would like to wait and do 2020 and 2021 together again.
We always like to save money, don't we?
You do.
So we probably do the 2021. Do you need a motion on that?
It would be nice to have a motion on that to put them together.
To have a motion, please.
So move.
Okay. And it sounds like I have a second already as well. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Eltoff?
Yes.
Schuler?
Yes.
Onsack?
Yes.
Carlsrud,
Yes.
Erdman,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Mahoney,
Yes.
Nielsen, Schmaltz, Schmidt,
Yes.
Bean. Ken Bean.
Think you signaled yes as well. Good. Well, to you
Motion.
people virtual, I'm sorry, but you can't have these little cupcakes that we have here in the room. But I am told that we are celebrating Tammy Norgaard's birthday, and she celebrates it for several days. So this is just one more part of her several days that we're celebrating it. Mayor Dardis had volunteered to sing happy birthday, but he's got a sudden bout of laryngitis, so he'll pass on that. But thank you, Tammy, for being alive, and hope you continue to enjoy your life.
Thank you for coming to my birthday party.
Drinks will be supplied later. Any other business of the group? Yes, barely. Thank you. If that, you have a motion to adjourn? Group's pretty reluctant. I don't think they want to leave right now.
Schmidt makes the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you, everybody. Thank you for everybody coming in virtually. We very much appreciate it, and eventually we might get back to living live in this world, but I appreciate everybody for participating. And Garrison, good luck with what you're going to do for us later this month, and move well in that bid. At some point, I think, Mary, we're going to have a groundbreaking ceremony, aren't we, somewhere, so we all get together and celebrate and throw some dirt?
Yes, we hope to this spring with the pipeline.
Okay. Did I vote on adjournment? I did. All those in favor said yes, yeah? Right, okay. Then we're adjourned. Thank you.